We've gone from me in the shed to about 25 people. I always say to the junior people in my firm that you start building your network right now. When they need help, they'll trust you to help them. Social media generally gives me the ick. And I think to a large extent, it's the devil's work. I was part of the team that saved the lollipop lady.
Hi, and welcome to the latest episode of But Is It Legal? The podcast from TBD Marketing. I'm your host today, Simon Marshall, and the founder of TBD Marketing. Hopefully by now you know that, if you've watched some of the podcasts before. And thanks for tuning in. I'll never take it for granted. I think it's a lovely thing to have people join us and listen to the stories and experiences of the lawyers and others that work in the legal sector that join us. Today, I've got one of my favourite people in the world joining us, and longest standing client, Florence Brocklesby.
Hello.
Florence, fancy giving us a quick introduction? Tell us a bit about Bellevue Law, your law firm.
So I'm Florence. I'm the founder of Bellevue Law. We're celebrating our 10th anniversary this year. It's a law firm that I set up from my garden office on my own a decade ago, with a view to working very much more flexibly than my previous city career had allowed me to do. And it's grown to a team of about 25, 30 people, all working flexibly and providing clients with advice on employment law, litigation, private client work, and some regulatory advice as well.
Congratulations on all the growth and the success of the business so far. Is it everything you'd hoped it would have been? Like looking back, on this decade that you've had at Bellevue Law, is it could you have dreamt it would have been where it is today?
I think your question assumes a degree of strategy and foresight that wasn't involved. I would not have, if you told me in 10 years' time that I would have this team of wonderful lawyers and business operations staff around me, fabulous clients doing really interesting work in areas that I think are really important and meaningful, I would have been delighted. But that's a much bigger ambition than I had at the time. So when I started the firm 10 years ago, I had 3 children, and at one point I had 3 children under 4. So I was quite busy at home. I'd worked in the city. I started my career in the city, trained in the city, stayed in the city for about 8 years. And then when I had my children, I had stopped practicing, and for about 5 years I was mostly at home, and I was also doing some lecturing at BPP Law School, which was actually a really wonderful way just to get out of the house, but also keep my hand in and keep my legal skills up to date. When I was ready to go back to practice, I could not see myself with the kind of family life that I had going back to working in the city. I have got friends who've done that and they've made a huge success of it.
Yeah.
And all credit to them, and it just wasn't what I wanted in any way, shape or form. And when I looked around, I couldn't really see any other law firms at the time that were offering the kind of flexibility that I wanted, as well as the kind of quality of work that I wanted to be doing. I think a lot's moved on in the last decade, but that was the position at the time. And so I just decided I'm going to work for myself. I didn't have any clients, so there was an element of risk involved in that. I didn't have any clients, and I had what we call the posh shed, which is a garden office that we'd inherited when we bought the house. So I dusted that down, and
it was there waiting for you. It was all auspicious, was it?
It was there. It was auspicious. I mean, I guess over the last decade, people have been working from all kinds of places, spare rooms, home offices. But I took myself down there. It was actually really quite important to me to have that space because I had a 3-year-old at the time who was in the house, so I needed to leave.
How big is the separation from the kitchen window?
I live in London. It was like 30 feet or something. It's not.
But mentally an important 10 yards.
I would go to work. I would get a cup of coffee. I would walk down the garden. I would go to work. I didn't have any clients, and when you set up a law firm, the SRA makes you write a business plan. So yeah. I wrote it, and it was my best efforts, but it was based on guesswork. I didn't.
Have you framed somewhere? Can we see this business plan?
No, I'm going. It was startlingly unambitious, and I'm going to look for it. I often refer to it because I talk to people often who are thinking about setting up legal practices. And it makes me laugh looking back because it's not, it didn't turn out anything like that. Like most business plans are not what happens once people get started. But I think the important thing I did was I just got started. And clients beget clients. So I got my first 3 clients on my school run.
Yeah.
Because I do a lot of employment law work, a lot of discrimination work, and a lot of sex discrimination work.
Right.
And so my first 3 clients were mums from school. And I always say I wasn't networking, I wasn't doing BD. I was literally just dropping my 5-year-old daughter at school. People approached me in the playground and said, "Oh, are you an employment lawyer? I might need some help."
Right.
And that's how I got started. And
do you mind me asking, did you already have those kind of connections at school anyway? Did you, I mean, I was like a PTA chair and did things as well as a dad. Were you involved with that kind of, the parent thing of the school, or was it something you had to learn to do as a result of, launching the business?
No, I mean, I was part of the team that saved the lollipop lady.
It sounds like incredibly important employment law work, right?
Yeah, it was a campaign. But I was very lucky. My kids went to a local school that was in an end of our street, but had an absolutely fabulous sense of community. So we did know each other. We did know each other. Everybody lived nearby. Kids had probably all been at nursery together, so there was a real sense of community there, and it was a good place to start. But I would say, looking back over building the business, a lot of the work that we get as a firm and that comes to me individually comes from people that we've known over years and decades. So, kids might have gone to school together. You and I went to school together, so we've known each other for a very long time. People I was at university with, people that I used to work with, friends and neighbours. And everybody, I always say to the junior people in my firm that you start building your network right now. You might not get instructions and work for years or decades, but you don't really need to think about it like that. And the people that you like and that you spend time with, and there's really positive side effect of that is that when they need help, they'll trust you to help them.
I remember one of the first times I came to see you, I think when we were working with each other a few years ago now, when I just set the business, I was on Northcote Road and sat at Starbucks, and you would come down from the school run, and I just saw you like high five a few friends as you're walking down the street, and I learned so much from it. No, it was amazing. I remember looking at it thinking, the law doesn't have to be the way that I've had it be for like 20 years or 15 years at that point in time, whatever it might have been. So I got a lot from that as well. I think that that approach is something that's inspired a lot of other people as well. They see that it doesn't have to be as starchy or as formal all the time as well, or certainly not when you're behaving as a human being rather than into the legal matter itself.
Well, you can have really high technical standards and you can give a really high level of service, and you could be a person at the same time, and that's more and more recognised. I think there's been maybe a fear, not just in law but widely in sort of professional services, maybe of sort of showing too much personality. But and I'm quite, as an employment lawyer, I'm quite a strong believer you should not bring your whole self to work. Nobody needs to see that, but to be human and friendly and empathetic, and I think that's particularly the case. If you act for individuals, if you act at difficult times of their life, they could probably Google some of the answers to what they want, for better or for worse. I don't try that at home, but what you want is somebody who's by your side, who's empathetic, and who understands the human side of what you're going through, as well as technically what your legal rights and obligations might be.
Yeah, I'd say that characterises the people that you've kind of brought in as part of the team as well. If I think about the group of incredible lawyers that you've attracted, and they've all worked at major city firms as well. I mean, the thing that you'd say about them is they're all quite fun to hang around with, as well as technically brilliant lawyers as well. Yeah. Tell me a bit about when we were younger as well and back at school. What you're thinking about being a lawyer whenever you've kind of finished at university as well. What was it attracted you to kind of do a job as a lawyer?
So I didn't study law at university.
No.
I studied philosophy and politics, and I had thought since I was a teenager I had considered being a lawyer, and I always say that my dad said I ought to be, because I was so argumentative. You really ought to be a lawyer because you argue about everything. And now I've got 3 teenage daughters and I feel his pain. I didn't study law at university. and I wasn't sure if I did want to do it or not, but it was always there in the back of my mind. And
Right.
actually, when I left university, I had a graduate job in a management consultancy for a little while, and that wasn't for me at all. So I took myself off to law school sort of a couple of years after university, and I absolutely loved it from day one. I loved law school, which is probably why I enjoyed lecturing as well. Um,
The intellectual rigor of it, or what was it that's...
and the challenge
Yeah.
of it, I think. And I think anyone who went to law school with me would say, anyone who went to school with me would say I was a bit geeky. My kids tell me the word is neek now. It's an amalgam of nerd and geek.
Oh,
I was
I like it.
I was a
I've
neek.
already learned something.
And I absolutely loved it. I found it really fulfilling, and I've enjoyed the practice of law, ever since. And as I said, I stopped when I had my kids for a little while, but I always knew I wanted to go back to it. And that's not an easy thing to do, actually. If you've had a career break, it's not an easy thing to do. It should be easier,
Yeah.
because obviously your brains don't come out with a baby. There's no reason at all why you shouldn't be able to have a path that's less than linear. But it hasn't historically been terribly easy to do that. But I'm incredibly glad that I did, because I still absolutely love being a lawyer. I love the profession. I love supporting clients and helping them to achieve their objectives, whatever they may be.
Are we making progress on that kind of return to work? Maybe predominantly mums and coming back into the law afterwards? Or does it feel like we're at a standstill from where we were a few years ago?
Yes and no. I think yes and no. I mean, I may not have been right 10 years ago to think that there wasn't anything out there for me and I had to build it myself. That may not have been correct. I mean, there already were, for example, consultancy firms. They've obviously grown in sort of number and size quite a lot in the last decade. And so Bellevue Law is really built with flexible working at its heart.
Right.
But obviously, all legal consultants, wherever they work, self-employed, and they will have a high degree of autonomy and flexibility. So that option is available. And you have seen, by and large, within the city firms, maybe more women in senior management. Lockdown has resulted in more flexibility about where you work. But flexible working is much more about whether you can work from home sometimes. It's, about, it means different things to different people depending on what they need and want. But it is hard, I think, still hard and challenging to progress in large law firms, I think, as a woman, particularly if you have children, because the career path in a traditional law firm is kind of traditionally is up and out. And the period where you really need to put your foot to the floor is often the period where you might be having a family, taking some time out, and that can have ramifications. So as I said, even from my elderly generation, and I'm 50 now, I've got friends who started out with me who have gone on to be hugely successful in very large firms, female friends who've gone on to be very successful and have leadership positions. So there's definitely, that path is definitely available there, but you really only need to look at the statistics on partners, and particularly equity partners, and the gender pay gap in those large firms to find it. They have, by and large, haven't got where they may say that they want to get just yet. And I think quite a lot of that is structural. But on the other hand, there's a lot more choice than there used to be.
I think it's true. I was looking at some figures the other day and trying to do some research, desk-based. I remember 20 years ago when I was looking at it for legal business, you'd have expected to probably make partner at 7 to 9 years qualification. That's elongated now. The average, the lawyer wrote in a magazine piece the other day, is 11 and a half at least. And I think that sweet spot you're talking about when people may well be considering having families is probably the exact period that's covered now. And then you elongate that a bit by other routes to entry, Silex or apprenticeships and this and that, and suddenly we've got these routes that make it that's the kind of life events are going on elsewhere, as it were.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many ways that you can look at challenging that. I mean, there isn't really any reason why you need to do it in that time frame.
No.
And there isn't any reason why, you couldn't go fast and then go slow for a bit and then go fast again. And there really isn't any reason why large profitable firms shouldn't be offering equal paid shared parental leave, which would mean that the same issues apply to everybody of childbearing age rather than just hitting women. So there are lots of things that could be done to change it.
Yeah.
But my very strongly held view is that people need to take control of their careers themselves, and if a particular structure isn't working, by all means, think about how you might be able to change that from within. But alternatively, just take yourself off somewhere that does work for you.
Have you
And there are
felt?
choices now.
I think that's such a great point. Have you felt, having done that yourself and having trodden that path for the last 10 years or so, have you felt that? I don't know what the right phrase is. Like almost that it's upon you to have to kind of show other people that they can make those choices as well in your career, or under no pressure to do that. Is that something you want to do, or do you feel like I've really got to give this back to other people?
Well, so my business has grown quite organically.
Yeah.
So we've gone from me in the shed to about 25 people, and it has just grown organically as more work come in. I've looked to hire more lawyers. Some lawyers have joined us who've got a caseload. Some lawyers join us who don't have a caseload, and we have work to share with them. And what we universally find is that they will, within 6 to 12 months, they'll be building their own practice because they do a great job for their clients. The clients come back, or their clients tell other people, and I think that's very liberating for them. And my main message to anybody who's thinking about making that leap is to have the confidence that you would be able to build a practice. I think that is quite hard. Look, it's easier in some practice areas than others, for sure. But I think it's people don't believe that they can do it, but the evidence is that they absolutely can. So I would be quite evangelical about saying you could bet on yourself, and like you've held down a job in a really challenging environment for a long period of time. It's probably because you're good at your job.
Yeah.
You're servicing your clients well. You're doing what you need to do. It's possible you haven't had the business development opportunities that you might have benefited from.
Yeah.
And there's nothing to be scared of in doing business development. There's so many different ways of doing it. But we've had a lot of lawyers join us with no clients whatsoever, often coming from quite large corporate firms where they wouldn't, they obviously wouldn't bring those clients with us, but they might be a little bit different than some of the clients who we service. People who've only worked for employers and then start working for senior executives, they've all made huge successes of it. For me, it's just not an issue. But I would say when I talk to people thinking about making that move, the biggest issue is the confidence to do it.
Yeah, and they seem to have been universally successful, exactly that as well. I mean, not just at Bellevue, but other places where I think a lot of people do make a success of it as well. I guess there is a bit of a culture, I think, at some of those mid-sized or larger firms of kind of like you can or you can't do these things. And I've found that the freedom that comes with, being a consultant means that you can just make those decisions. And there isn't one size fits all approach to BD, right? I know that you and I both have a slight aversion to being on camera as well, right? In comparison to some other things, but we like being face to face with people, and that's what we do, right? Is go and see people, that we have a coffee.
Yeah, and I think we always, when anyone joins us, firstly we get them to come and have a chat with you, and think about what it might mean to them to do BD. And I think there's a sort of feeling that it's something scary. It might involve seminars and writing large lengthy articles, but there are so many different ways that work for different people. And one of the things, people talk about LinkedIn quite a lot. Social media generally gives me the ick. Again, I've got three teenage daughters, and I think to a large extent it's the devil's work. But what I have found is that there have been periods in my career in recent years where, because of caring responsibilities that I have had, it's been simply impossible for me to go out and speak at a conference or even take somebody out for lunch. But LinkedIn allows you to network, to talk about what you're doing, to meet people. I mean, in a 21st century, meet people, but make genuine connections with people who you might have things in common with, talk about what you do. And it's available in a much more democratic way. So, for me, it might be that I've got caring responsibilities that mean that I can't be out and about at certain periods. But for other people, it might be they've got disabilities that make it harder for them to do that, or there's a lot of stuff going on in London, but they don't live in London, and it's very expensive for them to come and attend in-person
Yeah.
events. It's quite democratizing, and there are opportunities out there to find people who are aligned with you and where you feel you have something in common. And at the end of the day, I feel like you make connections with people who are like-minded, then you scatter enough seeds over time, it's going to help you to build a business, which is going to be a successful business because it's going to be working with people who are, like you and appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, I mean, I guess my biggest fear, having come out of doing marketing and all of them, having to do it myself again for the first time in years, was walking into a room and not knowing anyone. And so social media has been amazing for solving that, because when I walk into a room, most people have seen some of my annoying posts now and they know exactly who I am, and they can either make a decision to kind of approach or retreat, as it were, as appropriate. And I found that that is, for me personally, it works to walk in and people say, I think you're Simon Marshall. And that I hate that stranger danger element of kind of walking into big networking events as well. And it always surprises people when I say that about my own kind of experience, but I think it's there. The other thing I'd say that's happened over the last few weeks is a lot of those predominantly women, but other people that you're talking about there who might want to be consultants in the future are coming to me and saying they're being like censored or told they can't do BD in certain ways in their organisations, and there's a huge theme of that going on at the moment as well, undercurrent of it as well, and I think that as a profession we've got to think about that.
Yeah. And I think it's there is a challenge there that's
Mm,
specifically to LinkedIn. So we have an employment law practice, and you can see issues for employers around social media use, and it's in no way illegitimate for employers to think about having some say in their employees' social media use. Do you want to be
of
employing
course.
people who are posting incitements to racial violence online? Probably not, and that seems perfectly legitimate. But in LinkedIn, you have this particular issue where people are identified with their employer very directly,
Yeah.
often. But there's divergence of views about what we ought to be doing. Should you be using LinkedIn just to post your latest update about an award that your very large law firm has won, or you be using it to talk about topics where you feel quite strongly, issues and concerns that you have, and some of those may not be aligned with everybody who works for your employer. So there's sort of issues around free speech that come up there, but there also are some sort of valid concerns, and I think a lot of employers really wrestle with what they do about social media. But what I found interesting about your post about it was that the people who are telling me that they're being told that their posts are inappropriate are women.
Yeah, I don't think I think one guy has written to me in like the last year saying I'm being kind of asked to tone this down or do this differently, as it were, or toe a certain line, as it were. But it's always women trainees.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
also you see it in that's reflected across. I'd say so. My personal practice is that I act for a lot of senior women in law firms,
yeah,
and what you're telling me, I wasn't aware of it, but I'm not surprised by it. They're often told that there are issues with their behaviour that just wouldn't be issues for men. So you're too aggressive. I'm a litigator.
yeah,
You don't have to be an aggressive litigator, but you do. You very rarely hear men being told that they're too aggressive at work. Particularly in internet environments that are really quite robust. But there, and I often say to those clients, it's not clear to me how you could have won, because if you had been less assertive, you're probably not aggressive. You're probably not aggressive. I don't think you're shouting at anybody. I don't think you're punching holes in the wall. If you had been less assertive, you would be told that you were ineffective. You might even be ineffective. But there's a there's an unconscious bias that comes into play in the way people are judged, and actually in terms of people's career progression, that's really very significant because they don't look like a good fit. And the fact is, quite often people don't look like someone who ought to be promoted, and nobody's really thought very hard about whether actually objectively they're extremely good at their job.
yeah. I don't. I mean, for me, it's not settled. I think there's a huge debate going to go on for the next year, like a couple of years, on this as well. And I think we're going to see more voices come to the fore on it. Florence, getting serious for a minute, there's been a lot of news recently about violence against women and girls in the media. And I know that's part of what you do in terms of your practice as a lawyer. Any thoughts on that for us?
So periodically, it's in the news.
Yeah,
Most notably, 2018, the beginning of the Me Too movement, threw quite a lot of light on this. And then recently, there have been some horrendous stories that have made people focus on it again. But it's part of my practice more than it ought to be. ought to not be happening at all. And the statistics on violence and sexual assault and sexual harassment against women and girls are actually horrendous. The College of Policing published a report earlier this year where they said 1 in 12 women and girls would be the victim of a sexual assault, and 1 in 20 adults would be a perpetrator. But it's not 1 in 20 adults. I mean, most of the adults are men, so probably we're looking at something close to 1 in 10 men will be a perpetrator. And I think those statistics are hugely chilling, because that means that the trope of the sort of stranger in the alleyway is not really covering where we're really seeing that kind of thing happening. It's people who we know who are victims of this, and people who we know who are perpetrators of this. And it may be people who we know and otherwise like are perpetrators of this. And you see that across society. But of course, you see that in playing out in the workplace, because in any sizable workplace, that means you're going to have a number of people who are prone to behave in a way that is actually completely unacceptable. And there's new legislation coming in next month, which means that there's been a focus on employers needing to risk assess that and to take reasonable steps to prevent sexual harassment at work. And I feel very strongly that the starting point for that would be that in any sizable organisation, the assumption should be it will be happening here statistically. That doesn't mean that you're a bad organisation. You've got a group of people working there, some of whom are going to have these tendencies, or you may have third parties who your staff are interacting with, some of whom will have these tendencies. And we need to be honest and transparent about that. It's a possibility that this will be happening in our workplace. What can we do what can we do to eliminate it? And what can we do to ensure that everybody understands that we have zero tolerance for this from our team and from third parties, and that if people report concerns, those will be taken very seriously and not brushed under the carpet. And if that message is authentic and comes from the top, it will go a very long way to eliminating what is still a huge and frankly horrendous problem. And I would say a barrier to women progressing at work, because it's just not a level playing field if you're subjected to that kind of behavior on a reasonably regular basis.
Any thoughts on allyship, and specifically on male allyship, in relation to sexual harassment and calling out things at work in the new Act as well?
I think it is very much easier for men to stand up to this than it is for other women to stand up for this. So my very strong view would be, if you see it, you call it out. And that's awkward and difficult. And sometimes, it involves saying difficult things to people you might otherwise like. Sometimes it might involve reporting your boss. But it's such, when it's so normalized that we accept it, but it's actually totally unacceptable. And if you want to call yourself an ally, that's what you need to do.
Do we think, as a result of the Act coming into force, that we'd like to see senior executives at major kind of organisations that are then reported, are dealt with, maybe lose their jobs over the course of the next 12, 15 months?
Well, let's see. I mean, this is already illegal. So let's see. I think it will I think that the recent publicity, and I think that this legislation, and I know that, we're being asked to support clients in understanding it. I think it will give employers an opportunity to take a fresh look at what they should already be doing. Is there more that they could do? Not just kind of rolling out policies and a little bit of online training, but in a meaningful way, thinking about where are the risks in our business, which may be very different from the risks in someone else's business, and what can we do, and what can our leadership do to make sure that everybody knows that we really mean it.
How does it play out in law firms in terms of violence against women and girls, or sexual harassment in the workplace, other forms of discrimination against women?
So law firms are organisations, they're groups of people. They're typically more male dominated in the leadership than some other organisations. And so, of course, statistically, you're going to see that. And we see that in our practice. We see incidents of sexual harassment within law firms, just as we do across a wide range of industries. Anecdotally, based on our practice, I would say we are seeing law firms clamping down on it since Me Too, and because the regulator has made it clear that non-financial misconduct, and including specifically sexual harassment or sexual assault, is a regulatory matter. So as well as there being some legal consequences for that kind of behaviour, there can be regulatory consequences for the perpetrator and also for the firm. And then more recently, the SRA has introduced a new obligation on partners to challenge incidents where they see unfair or discriminatory behaviour. Again, that puts a regulatory burden on law firm partners if they're seeing this kind of conduct, if they're aware of this kind of conduct, to challenge it, even if it may fall short of something that needs to be reported to the regulator. And then, of course, over time, if you're seeing very serious issues, it does need to be reported. And we have seen quite a significant increase in reports of sexual misconduct to the SRA as well. And that's the same across the other regulated sectors as well. And workplace culture generally has become something that is across the regulator's radar in a way that it probably wasn't some period ago. And it's something that is more of a discussion within the profession as well. You're hearing leaders in the legal sector talking about workplace culture more generally, and having a healthy workplace culture. And the hope is that over time that's going to lead to the elimination, or more realistically, significant reduction in that. And like any other workplace, it's about the leaders making it very clear that it will not be tolerated, and then acting when it occurs.
It would seem to me that, with the majority of new lawyers coming into the profession are women, right? We work on the law, we advise people in this area of law as well, and it's actually a regulatory issue, but it's also an operational issue as well, that you'd want women to flourish within your workplace as well, that the law actually could take a lead in this area as well and be an exemplar of kind of best behaviour for other sectors, as it were. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, it just seems to me to be so patently obvious that uh, an environment that tolerates sexual misconduct is an extremely unhealthy working environment. I mean, I think there's a fear of addressing it because there's a fear of admitting that it's happening. But again, if you look at the statistics, of course it's happening. In any large workplace, given those statistics about what a significant proportion of the population is engaging in sexual misconduct, of course it's going to be happening. So if we can admit that, then we can address it. And then hopefully we can work towards making it something that is recognised as completely unacceptable in our working environment.
Any thoughts from you on what changes law firms could make that would have an immediate beneficial effect for, I mean, specifically for women within the workplace, just as that kind of group, as it were?
How long do you have?
10 minutes.
Yeah. Okay. That's not long enough. No, I mean, look, I have a lot of friends and people who I've known for a long time who work across the whole of the legal industry, and I don't really believe that it's right or sensible to see this in really stark black and white terms. It's law firms are not bad or good. They're a collection of people, and we all bring, nobody's perfect. We all bring our good side and our bad side, and we bring our history and our prejudices and so on to work. So we can be, we can be critical friend. I think that the specific, and there are issues for working women that go across the whole of the world, the whole of the country, every industry. Specifically in law, the chargeable hour is a huge issue for anyone who has other demands on their time. So, I trained in the city and I worked very, very hard, very long hours. There was a bedroom that you could go and sleep in if you were going to be there overnight. There was a branch of knicker box next door so you could go and buy new underwear the next morning. I mean, it was all set up on the basis that you were going to work really, really hard. I don't really have a problem with that. At that stage of my life, I learnt a lot. I made lifelong friends. I have a work ethic that honestly is beneficial. I can't do that anymore, and I I didn't ever really want to be a partner in a firm like that. Anyway, there were lots of good things about it, but it was never my ambition. But it would have been a struggle for me to do that alongside having my family, and that so that is a very significant issue, and I think people should begin to look at that creatively. Obviously, there's an argument, a wider argument about whether the chargeable hour is the right way of measuring the value that lawyers bring, but also there is a question about whether there ought to be whether we ought to challenge that sort of one size fits all. You know, why is it the case that you can't be successful in a large firm? And in many cases, not always, but in many cases, and work part time. Now, there are some kinds of work where, you know, you kind of need to be on it at particular times all the time.
Yeah.
But there are a vast majority of the work that lawyers do, that's just not the case. And, you know, in my firm, because the lawyers are consultants, we don't have chargeable hour targets. So your commitment is that if you take something on for a client, you have to do it. And even then, you know, we try to have a buddy system to cover holidays. We've got a large enough team that we can share and help each other out. But we don't have that. And it has been it has damaged our client relationships, not at all. In fact, I would say it's at the heart of the success of the firm in terms of client satisfaction.
Yeah.
You know, as you know, we survey our clients every year. They have always rated us 9.5 out of 10 or above, and they're very, very happy. My view is that is not despite the fact that the lawyers work flexibly. It is because they work flexibly, and that has allowed me to hire the most extraordinary lawyers from, you know, sort of with glittering backgrounds who are dedicated, brilliant, and kind. And therefore, the clients are happy, they come back, and the business has grown. And so my biggest challenge would be not just do you need to charge by the hour? I mean, we mostly charge by the hour. Do you need to charge by the hours? Do you need to charge quite so many hours? That's a real challenge.
I think there's lots of debates to be had about value-based pricing as well. Lots of talk about it. I think that clients say that they'll enjoy value-based pricing until they get hit with a really big bill for the value-based pricing, right?
I mean, more or less, yeah.
You know, exactly that, right? What's the total cost is the thing. On balance, would you recommend a career in the law to the kids, to other relatives, to young relatives, to people who could be future lawyers, maybe your, you know, teenagers?
So my teenagers have no interest whatsoever.
I got that.
Both their parents are lawyers, and they don't think it's exciting and interesting, despite me telling them constantly that it is. So if you were that way inclined, I would say absolutely go for it. I think that it's a super exciting time to potentially become a lawyer.
Yeah.
I think that for the generation coming through, the career path will look so different from what my career path looked like. It will be completely unrecognizable. And there are so many exciting opportunities. So if it's something that's exciting for you, if there's something you feel passionate about, and if you're prepared to put in the work, why not? It's a brilliant career, and it's a brilliant profession.
Can we talk a bit about the kind of values-based side of things and the things, your kind of passion projects, as it were, as well? Maybe a bit that you do on the pro bono side or on responsible business side. Any themes for us there that we should know about?
Well, I am very passionate about ethical business, and I think maybe that might come a little bit from being an employment lawyer and seeing, you know, some things that are done really well and some things that are done less well in business. And obviously, you know, you only have to live in the world to see the debate around that and the impact, positive and negative, that business can have. So our firm became a B Corp earlier this year, which has been an absolutely brilliant thing to do. I would see that as something that has been good for our business, as well as being a good thing to do. B Corps are businesses that balance profit and purpose. There are very few legal businesses, even fewer regulated law firms, that are have signed up to do that, and I would very strongly advocate that it's a wonderful, brilliant thing to do. And more firms should look at doing it. I would be happy, very happy to talk to anyone who was thinking about doing it. The idea that you can have a business that is there, to make money and to have everybody earn a decent living,
Yeah.
but also to have a positive impact in the world. That's something that resonates very much with me. It also resonates with almost everybody.
Any takeaways? You went to the big B Corp conference in Oxford recently, is
Yeah,
that
I
right?
went to the B Corp Festival.
Is it really like a festival? Does it feel like that when you go and
Well,
kind of meet these other like-minded?
it's like the kind of festival I would like to go to, not
Well,
necessarily the kind of festival my teenagers would like to go to. It was fabulous. It was quite inspiring. And really the theme was about um, how businesses that are interested in having a positive impact
mm.
can scale that impact so that it's more meaningful, which is obviously urgently required at this point in history, by collaborating. And I'm very keen to be part of that. I'm very keen for Bellevue Law to be part of that as well.
Something I meant to ask earlier was, do you think we've hit the upper limit now on kind of those chargeable hours? I mean, we're talking about 2,000 hours for some of those people who work at city firms. Any thoughts on that?
I think it's for many people it's not healthy.
Right.
So I mean, the people who are doing this kind of hours, I mean, these are highly intelligent, highly marketable people, quite capable of getting a job elsewhere. So they have some agency in this, and they can make different choices. I also do know people, because I've worked in this environment for such a long time, who absolutely thrive on it. And would don't have any regrets 25, 30 years into their career about having made those choices. So there's an element of each to their own, but there have to be some limits around that, I think. And I think that there's there is a risk, and I see it in my practice because, as I say, I act for quite a lot of people who work in large law firms. There is a risk to people's health. And I think there's a business risk around it as well. I mean, I'm not sure I'm not sure not sure clients would be delighted to be paying the rates they're paying for someone who's absolutely exhausted.
Mm.
And I think that there probably is a better way. But I think, alongside that, we all have to recognize that sometimes you have to work hard to get the job done. But the model that's built on paying junior lawyers extremely high salaries, and in return for that, working them extremely hard, is to drive even greater profits. To me, that's just not appealing or attractive.
Yeah, it's changed a lot over the course of the time that I've been in the sector. I think you'd have thought 13 or 1400 was a lot, when I came in, and now it's, maybe 2000 at some of those firms as well. And that feels like a significant difference in terms of total time commitment as well.
Yeah, I mean, there's a grown-up conversation to be had about it, because not every job is going to be 9 to 5. Not everyone's going to be able to go to yoga after straight from work every evening and also get paid quite significant amounts of money. But and as I say, a lot of the people who are making these choices, they do have some agency in it, and they these are choices that they're making. But I would query how sustainable and healthy it is. But I feel like if it's not working for you, a sensible thing to do would be to do something different.
Explore your options. There are options.
Yeah, but there are options, and I think I often find people feel very trapped in a workplace that doesn't suit them, and I only see the ones that doesn't suit them. They're really the ones that are really happy. They don't have to pick up the phone to me, but they are able. You do have choices, and it may not be possible to walk out the door today or tomorrow, but of course, you can make a plan and move forwards.
The last couple of questions. If you hadn't been a lawyer, what would you have done?
Oh, that's a horrible question. I don't know. That's terribly unimaginative of me. I can't imagine not being a lawyer. Sorry,
That's a great answer. No, not really. I mean, that just tells me that you've chosen the right thing for yourself, right? I mean,
I really love it.
if somebody's considering a role as a consultant solicitor, what piece of advice would you give them? What would you say?
Be brave. You
Great.
can do it.
Florence, thanks so much for joining me today. I mean, what a lovely conversation to have. And for those of you who don't yet follow Florence on social media, please do so. You'll see that she posts every now and then when it works for her and her life and her client base, everything else that's going on. But it's well worth watching out for. I think she tends to call the market regularly when she does do so. Equally, if you like this episode, send it to a friend or subscribe as well on YouTube or Spotify or wherever you want. So again, thanks, Florence.
Thanks for having me.
And see you next time. Cheers.